And I think we're going. Great. Yep. So we're recording now. Thanks for spending your lunchtime or your near lunchtime with us again today. And the chat is on. And let me switch this over. This transcription thing is pretty amazing, and it's very distracting too as I talk along, and then it puts the text out there. But there we go. So there's the chat. If we run into something, you have questions on it, comments, then please chat away, and I'll try to pay attention to this, and so I can hopefully give you some good information back. So yeah, here we go. We're going to talk about just a broad variety of topics. Hopefully there'll be some things that are useful to you, some reminders perhaps, or if you're new to Synergi, hopefully you'll get a good idea of what all we can do in the product. And then the plan is that next week we'll start the 16 sessions for the standard online class, and we'll jump in here with session 1 talking about the user interface. This will be our third time through this, and so hopefully we can find some ways to change things up, take a different perspective on things, and sorry, let me get this a different approach to some things and give you maybe some new insights, and then also for us, give us a different perspective, because we work hard every month trying to recognize things that you all might need, ways that we can make the product better, from some very simple things all the way into the more complex applications and model enhancements. All right, so I'm a little bit groggy today. We just got in last night from this. Thought I'd share some personal stuff with you all here, since we spend an hour a week together. But we jumped in the car and spent 3 days in a tent at this place called Watkin Glen in New York. And so folks around the East probably know about it or have certainly been there. It's just a beautiful, these are glens, these caverns that have been chiseled out by creeks and for 10,000, 15,000 years. So you can walk through this, and I think there's 15 waterfalls in here. It's just spectacular. And then we did a little disc golfing. There's a golf course there for disc golfing, which has gained a lot of popularity. It's, my son here, he's big into it. But this course has got these dinosaurs all over the place, and I guess they got them from, I'm guessing it's like a Jurassic Park or something like that. They're not plugged in, but they are set up for motion, and so that's kind of neat. And then this is one of the wineries. So the Finger Lakes in New York has this is Seneca Lake, just loaded with these wineries. This is a distillery, and just a beautiful view over the lake. And then we did a little stand-up paddleboarding a couple of nights there. So this is one of the nights. And so anyway, quick little jaunt. It was really nice. I got some sunshine, and back to it now. So yeah, so I'm going to get off of these slides here and fire up Synergi and start talking about things that we do in Synergi Electric. And also our user conference is coming up at the end of September. So if you have not registered, please do register. It's a great time for us to showcase different parts of the product and get your feedback. We're going to have some client presentations, and if you're interested in doing a presentation, let us know also. And it's certainly easy to do it now because we're all online. We can just fire up a video link, or you can pre-record it also, and then we can play it. Okay, so and so now we've got a bunch of new folks, brand new to Synergi Electric, and so I'm going to try to talk about things for new and for existing clients. So the support tab is the place to go for lots of things that you would need as far as help and documentation. And so this is where the technical reference sits. And then there's the online help and the user guide. So the online help, I don't bring that up often. I'm much closer to the technical reference, but we've got some great, Aubrey, a great technical writer who maintains this. I'm out of date on this thing, but with the online help, you've got this this interface here, and then you can just kind of drill down into different topics, and there's text and material on these things. So that's a great place to go for help. The user guide is similar content, it's just more of in a book form. And then the technical reference here, this is a framework that we built to consolidate our documents. So we do have a good bit of redundancy. I don't know why that's labeled 611. That's interesting. Yeah, we've got a good bit of redundancy in the documents, and so we built this framework so that we could group documents together. And what we're gradually doing is merging them and getting rid of duplication, trying to fill in gaps where we have them, and keep up with new functionality also. But it's a very, fairly short table of contents. And if you get into a topic like lines and cables, there's the principles are more the technical material. So it's going to be equations and theoretical type stuff. And then the handbooks are going to be more screenshots and how-to types of content. So that's the technical reference. And there is the Yammer community. If I click on that, let's see here, will come up. And if you're not in Yammer, then please email Kyle, and he can get you set up with a login. But we've got a lot of activity going on now with folks, and so we've got clients posting comments, questions, and then Star is a huge, hugely important member of our consulting group here. She knows all about model building and integration and stuff like that. And so anyway, we've got a forum here where you can talk to us and we can interact. And so that's on Yammer, great tool. And then fairly new piece of Synergi Electric is the video catalog here. And that's what this session that we're in today will eventually find its way to this list. And then you can just go down through here and see different topics. You can see here, we've got model building that we've hit in the standard training a couple times. And so these are the sessions out of the 16 sessions. And then we've got some other ones down here that are just kind of ad hoc. And so there's a filter tool over here that you can use to try to find the sessions that you're interested in. So that's the video catalog. Let's see. That's then we've got the startup page, which I have mine turned off, but a lot of you all might have yours coming up. It's on the views ribbon here. Start page. So this comes up, I think, by default, and you can turn it off in the preferences. But over here, there's things you can click on, a lot of the same things. But this user seminar is coming up. We messed up by having this thing disabled, because once around March or so, we'll have a date. We'll have everything kind of ironed out, and we should have had this active the whole time. But anyway, you can click on these sorts of things on this startup page also. Okay, so now as far as the, let's go look at this user seminar thing again. I wanted to do that. And let's see if I've still got the link. Nope. So let's see if we can find it. So I'm going to go to the D&B website here. And D&B is a big company doing all sorts of stuff. So it's a lot of neat stuff that I look at in here also. There's some seminars coming up at a higher energy level that I hope to attend in a few days. So I think we do Synergi Electric User seminar. Let's see if that works. And so the second one here, it's got a virtual seminar, and will be our, I can't remember if it's our second or third virtual seminar. And of course, the beginning of the year, we had hoped it would be in person, but so anyway, here we go, the 28th through 30th of September, and you can add it to your calendar and register. It's free. We just kind of like to know what to expect, and the folks who are dealing with this are very keen on numbers and all that. So if you can register, please do that. And then I think the links for attendance and all that will be sent to you. So Electric Grid User Seminar coming up in a month. All right, so that's a lot of stuff on documentation, and so the ribbon bars in Synergi used to be kind of a big deal, but nowadays it's so common. You kind of expect applications to have ribbon bars. They don't need to go through that. Analysis now. So of course, load flow. That's the meat of the heart of it all, is load flow. Where's the power go? What do the voltages look like? And so you can run load flow in here and get analysis reports. Lots of reports in here, and we've got all sorts of tools here to get this information out. So there's exporting tools. You can open these things in databases. You can open them up in Excel. So it's pretty handy to take and have all this show up in Excel so that you can create equations, or you can use formulas to calculate your own maybe tallied results in a certain way, or make charts, things like that. But these reports have chapters in them, and a lot of them are highly formatted. These summaries are usually going to be formatted with, here we've got some cascading stuff on transformers, and then we have a lot of tables that are just raw lists of numbers. So here's all the conductors in the model, and the lengths, voltage drops, things like that, based on the type of conductor. And down here towards the bottom, we get into just data dumps. So here's every section and a whole bunch of results for those sections. So this is one where I wouldn't want to sit here and work through this list, but you can. There's you can click the headings, of course, to sort. Sorry, double click and sort the columns. You can filter in these little filter boxes. You can say, well, I just want to see things that are greater than 123, for example, in that cell, and then it's going to just show that. So there's tools in here to make this hopefully usable for you. Any columns that you see that are highlighted, like not highlighted, sorry, that are this blue color, the white background with the blue color, these are IDs. And so you can right click on these, and from here you can zoom and go to that section on the map. You can also go and right click on these and hit the edit button, which is going to bring up the editor. In this case, it's a section editor. Sorry, I usually have all this on a different monitor, so everything's wanting to jump over there by default. Section IDs, and the section editor can come up here, and if you have things like switches, you can click on switches and operate them. So these are kind of live links here to do things based on whatever the facility type is. So that's the load flow and the reports. Everything in Synergi now is time of day based, and so we'll certainly get into this when we get into the standard training course. But it is this time last year, I think, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, we were talking about getting rid of the option to turn off time of day. So now time of day is always activated. It's always there, and you can see what time of day the analysis is being run at down here at the bottom. So I'm running on a June weekday, 1 p.m. I tend to have my time set there because it's our solar peak, and a lot of this stuff is revolving around DER and solar generation and things like that. So that's my time of day. Now, why is it going to matter to you? It could be that it doesn't matter. And maybe for a good bit of clients, there's no significance of the fact that we are running time of day. So what do you need to have in the model to make it a time of day model? Well, you've got to have something in here to designate what the loads are doing throughout the day. And let's go look at three ways to do that. One is there's a global setting for how loads respond or how they change throughout the day. So if we go into the model tab and the model options here, and pardon the overview, again, when we get into the standard course, we'll definitely take more time going through these in detail. But on the loads tab here is where the global defaults are. And so these are going to be profiles. We'll look at one of them in a minute, but it's just a curve, a percentage, basically a per unit curve for the load behavior throughout the hours of the year. And so you can come in here and just say that all my distributed loads are going to do this and spot loads are going to do that. That's a very low granularity approach, right? All the loads are doing the same thing, but it's a step in the right direction, and you might have some data to throw at this, or you might just have just your engineering experience about what the load should do. So if you've got nothing, you can easily come in and get this set up to have some sort of load behavior. The next step, the next more detailed approach would be to use these meters. Typically, you're going to have a meter outside of the feeder, and on these meters, you can say, well, we're going to set up a demand profile. So you can go into these meters, and this is where your feeder demands are stored. You can go in here and say, well, we've got a profile, and this profile is right here, a demand profile. And so when we look at the year, this is what the demand on that meter looks like. So we've got a demand profile, and then I've got a load profile also. And it's confusing, the difference between the two. The way I think about it is the demand profile is oftentimes going to be a direct copy of your actual demands on this feeder. So you've got feeder demands, they get pushed into Synergi using the data lake or some other approach. And if you look at this tab, then on this particular new Springfield feeder meter, this is what we're going to see throughout the year. So these are the demands. Now the load profile can be copied from this or derived from it. And you notice that the load profile doesn't have negative values. It's always positive. And so what you can do is say, all right, we're going to copy this from our demands, and we're going to use this to kind of give it just an estimate of what the loads on this feeder are going to do. And so, it's not super precise, especially if you've got a mixed feeder where you have commercial loads and residential or industrial. Each load is going to be doing something potentially very different, but it's something to have your loads go up and down and interact with generation and other things in a more realistic way. So I said you can copy it. Here is a copy demands to loads. And the derive, if you're going to derive the load profile, that's in a different spot. And what it amounts to is we're saying, well, my demand profile in June, if I've got a feeder that has a lot of PV generation, my demand might do this. All right. So if I've got a bunch of generation, then we've got this big dip. Well, I don't want my loads to do that. The loads aren't going to do that. And so what the derivation piece, it's in a different application, but what it does is it goes through your model, runs load flow, and takes the generation. And the generation oftentimes is going to depend on the time of day. So if it's solar generation, there's going to be a good amount of it in the middle of the day. So it'll take that generation and add it to this demand profile. so that you end up with a load profile that is, if we just did a copy, we would end up with a load profile at 0 down here. But if we do that derivation piece, then the generation gets added back into this, and so it'll build up this load value again. And so that you do your loads are consuming power, and then your generators are generating power, and you can kind of see how those two interact. So that's the second way to deal with time of day loads, is using a load profile here. And then the third way is using customer class curves. And so this has been used a long time. This was in Synergi from the very beginning, and it's a good approach, but it's can be data intensive, and I think a utility kind of has to have a strategy and infrastructure around developing these curves, because you're going to need customer samples. You're going to need to do data processing and all sorts of stuff, to statistical types of things, to get load curves for different classes of customers. So maybe you have residential 1, 2, 3 curves. Maybe you've got customers, different sorts of commercial rates or customer classes. So you've got to get all these set up based on their recorded demand information, and then you have to get it assigned to the model. And so that assignment, you can do it, or there's a CMM module in Synergi that does that sort of thing. But maybe 20% of our clients, and maybe a little high, 15-20% do customer class modeling. Okay, so what else have we got here now? So that's the load piece. Then on the generation side, of course, we have solar generators, and you can have solar generators set up in 4 spots here. Oh yeah, so I got a chat here. You bet. Yeah, I will do that. The tracing. Yeah, I will do that from downstream and upstream from a node. Yes, let's do that. Let me get through this this generator thing here. There's standalone generators that you can put in, and so these are going to sit on the section like this. And for those brand new to Synergi, how do you put a generator onto the model? Well, you go to the warehouse, and you are going to create a generator, and then once you have a generator type, then you'll just take and drag it and drop it. You left click on it, drag it and drop it onto the model, and you're ready to go with it. So this is a standalone generator, and it's going to have storage capacity or capabilities. So if we had a generator that had solar, here's commercial's not. Here's a solar park plus storage. Then you can come over here and turn on the battery, and your solar generator is going to do that sort of thing, and then your battery is going to operate, and the two work together. And this is ongoing work with us and with you all, learning about how these things work together and what sorts of things we need to model going forward. What are we trying to understand and achieve by modeling this? And so these things are working their way into applications and so on. So the time of day piece of the generators, you can set up a profile, so you can manually sketch in a profile for how that generator is going to operate. But the approach that we recommend is on this weather irradiance tab. You go into this global irradiance, and you put in your latitude and hit this button right here. And so then we're going to have a profile for the solar output on your generators for the year. So that's how you would get a generation, and that's going to be time of day also. Okay, so all that's going to feed into load flow, and that's why the time of day piece of this is really important, because now you've got loads and you've got generation. They're all moving with respect to time, and so when you run a load flow is important. So to help understand the system more, we've kind of moved away from running load flow to running something like a 24-hour analysis. And if I run 24, then it's going to take whatever month I'm in and run, I'm sorry, whatever day I'm in. So I'm in a weekday in June, and it's going to run through that day and give me a bunch of information in a chart form and also in a report form. So the time of day, trying to comprehend that is significant. And so we've got these sorts of charts. And then when we get into, if you want to look at your system over a whole year, then you can run a 576 analysis. And I'm just going to make this, run as fast as possible on a single feeder here. So a 576 is going to look at the entire year now. And then we've got a table of results for that year, summarizing the year. And then we've got charts here that have been improved over the last maybe 6 months. We got some good feedback, and we've simplified these a lot. So the weekday, weekend, that's what those letters are, WD, WE. That matters, especially in this application, because if we're running over weekends and weekdays, then Synergi can look at the calendar for this month and determine how many of those day types there are in June. The other option that you can run is to use peak days and min days. And so if you do that, then there is no calendar, and a lot of the energy-based results are not going to be there. Synergi will either say, I'm not going to produce those, or they'll be zeros, because we don't know how many peak days there are or min days in the month. All right, so some different applications. Then I'm going to do this trace thing that Ricardo asked about. So the 576, there's also time series analysis, where you can go in and analyze the system on a minute-by-minute basis and get this sort of thing. So here we have the percent loading at the substation, and this intermittency is due to the generators on the model. And this is one generator, and you can see that that's very choppy. And that's because I have a spreadsheet that has the irradiance data that was downloaded from the Department of Energy, I think. And when Synergi runs time series analysis, we're latching onto that spreadsheet, pulling in the irradiance values to determine the generator output. And that's what's being used in the model. If we had regulators, switch caps, substation transformers, those sorts of things are also going to have a time delay on their operations. And so you can get maybe a good idea of how something is going to impact your tap changers, number of tap changes at the substation, for example, or the impact on regulators due to PV. And then you can change the time settings on those devices and see if things help, and so on. So that's one common approach or common reason to use time series analysis here, is to see how these automated devices deal with this intermittency. So time series analysis, and then we get into forecasting and load allocation. We just talked about these, was it last week, week before? And so the load allocation is going to be used to set up your loads on the model. Usually you'll have demands at the feeder, and so based on those demands, where does the load go? Forecasting is similar to that, except it's going to set up the loads on a multi-year basis. The model in Synergi is a multi-year model, and let me go back to a previous selection here of feeders. So this is my 2017 model. I need to update the year on this thing. And if we go future years, you can click this up and go into future years and see how all these lines have been built in here. And you can go to the build tab. This is where you'll go to add things to your model. And if I add sections, you can use the add section tool, and hopefully these are all very intuitive for you. And if I run a load flow, it's 2019 demands, loads, switching, phasing, conductors, all that sort of stuff are tracked by year. And then I can go back, and you see when I go to 2018, that stuff is gone. So the infrastructure is tracked on a year-by-year basis. So forecasting is important for that, because with this application, you can set your demands up on a multi-year basis, and then forecasting will go through and try to set up the loads so that you get the growth projections that you put into the application. Hopefully it can meet all those expectations for your growth, and forecast the model. Then we've got the protection side of things, right? You can, if you've got a device in here, you can add devices to a TCC like this. I've got breakers and fuses and reclosers in here. These things can be drug around. You can look at the coordination, put in lines for amps and so on. And then you can also run a check coordination on the entire thing. So you can say, all right, just check my coordination on everything. So you can run this application and see where you have problems with coordination, and then go into those areas and see what sorts of things are failing. So fuses and reclosers and fuses and all those different devices, there could be miscoordination problems. So you can see those in here, stick it on a TCC and try to fix it. And the check coordination stuff is in a module, and some of you may not have that. If you don't, you can still show curves on TCCs, and it's also there's other applications where we use devices and settings, and so if you can get protection data into your model, you should do that. So your reclosers, fuses, it's definitely have them in the model, and try to get the data in there. It's a good thing. Okay, so we've got that's protection stuff. We've also got, you can deal with reliability. So if we want to say, all right, what's going on with SAFE and SAIDI, you can easily run reliability here and look at the indices, and does a load allocation overwrite the load profile? No, it's going to use the load profile. And so if you have a load profile set up and you run load allocation, it's going to, it gets pretty confusing even for me. But in the last few weeks, we talked about load allocation and how it's going to proportionally set the loads. If you have load profiles now, that load profile is going to be applied backwards. So if you think about, let's say we've got a load of 50 kW. This, like the nameplate's what I call it. So you've got 50 kW in the editor, and you have a load profile that's at 50%. Well, the actual load is going to be 25 kW. 50 kW times 50% gives us, so when we run load flow, we would see 25 kW. Well, now if we run load allocation, and let's say load allocation is wants to set, it wants to have a load on that section of, pick a number here, that of 50 kW on that section. And we're allocating at a time where we have 50% on the profile. It's going to take that 50 kW and divide it by the 50%, and then divide those two, and then it's going to give us 100 kW, which is going to go into the edit box. So it's allocation is doing what load flow does. It's just backwards. It's dividing by the profile values to get the setting in the edit box, so that when you go and run load flow and it multiplies by the profile, you get the load that was expected during allocation. So anyway, your load profiles are not going to be changed. The only time the load profiles get modified is when I was talking about the load profile at the meter. And if you run that 576 analysis, there's a setting in there that says adjust my meter load profiles to account for generation. And that's when it does that processing to add in the generation back onto the load profile. But that's only for the second approach, where you have your profile set up at the meter. If you're using customer class curves and things like that, those are all going to be very solid, because they're based on your load research data and so on. Now, here in reliability, it's just indices, SAFE, MAFE, there's a whole bunch of them that we calculate. these are not going to match your OMS generated values. There's calibration tools that you can adjust, have these adjusted to match, but just when you set up the model and everything and you run it, they're not going to match. But the trends should be in the right direction, because why are we doing this? Well, we've got these indices, and now we want to go in and do something. We want to do tree trimming or reconfigure, do those sorts of things, maybe add a recloser. And so what's the impact going to be? How is it going to improve reliability? Well, you do those things in Synergi and run reliability again, and then you see the improvements. All right, well, we've got things like motor start, arc flash analysis, transmission models, which we hit that about a month ago, I guess. We can bring in networks. I'm sorry, the transmission model would sit around this. And then we also do secondary networks, which would be low voltage, urban type networks. You can model those. And then secondary, of course, is a huge deal in Synergi, and we're progressing with this I can't think of the word now. This model that the secondary is kind of folded within the section here. So you have distribution transformers. Here's a section that has some distribution transformers and customers all represented inside of here. And then when we run load flow, load allocation, those sorts of things, we're running all the way to the customer. So a lot of data in here, but you don't have the clutter on the screen. The data load and save times seem to be fine. The analysis times seem fine. So as we're moving ahead, we're extending applications into the secondary more and more. All right, so to trace between 2 points, and let's just do it first here. And so downstream and upstream from a node to a source. Yeah, so if we want to trace from here up to the source, you can right click on a section, and we're going to go into the query path right here. So if you do a right click, a query path, then this query set is this tab over on the Explorer. Oops, this is a modal box, sorry. I'll show you that in a minute here, but this you can add to an existing query if you wanted to, but what I want to do is I want to just add, my current query set is empty, and then I can do everything downstream or everything upstream. So let's do the upstream path and finish. And this tab right over here shows the query set. And there's some applications that'll run on what's in the query. This list can also be exported. I can right click and open this in Excel, get it out of Synergi if these are sections that I want to use for something. And then if, let's say I just want to stop at this point and not have the rest of this. So here I can right click on this and do query path. And then what I want to do now is clear. I want to use the current one, and I want to remove my upstream path. So if I click on finish there, then see these are all taken out. And so now I have a path between these 2 points that are in the query. And a typical thing that you might do then is go to the build tab and do multiple editor. And then whenever you have things queried, this multiple editor is going to affect that query set. If you don't have anything queried at all, the multiple editor is going to impact the entire model. So that's one of the main reasons why you query things. A lot of times you might want to know the impedance along this path, and for this, I think we did this last week. You would have you'd go up here and do a set for analysis, but first let me clear the query off because it's really a separate thing. Sorry, clear that. Default here and do a set for analysis. I might have this backwards. And if I go down here and do a right click on this, and I go to special reports, I can do here to analysis section. And now I've got the impedance. So it shows me the path, how far it is, a quarter mile, and half a mile, sorry, and then the impedance along the path is here. So that's a nice thing that you can do with this these special reports, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's move on into, so time of day is always on, multi-year modeling. The building stuff is super intuitive, I think. One thing that's kind of confusing sometimes is if you're zoomed way out, you see these buttons will gray out, add and reconnect. And that's because these buttons are going to rely on nodes. And for me, and I recommend you just don't have your nodes displayed. So see, I never see nodes in here. And Synergi is not a nodal product. We don't put anything at the nodes except for coordinates. So if I zoom in here, I don't see nodes. If I want to add a section now, I click on that and my nodes show up. So the reason that these tools are grayed out way out here is if I turn on nodes, they're going to be too small, or they're going to be on top of each other, and so you can't really use it. And so that may be confusing, but otherwise it's a drawing tool. You should be able to, hopefully it'll make sense. Some of these reconnect is a little more involved, and we'll get to that, gosh, in maybe 2 weeks, I guess, when we get to the standard class. Okay, I want to get into coloring the map and annotate it and all that, but let's look at something that comes up all the time that folks ask about is hosting capacity maps. And I'm not going to get into all the hosting capacity, but on the DER tab, there's all these DER related applications, and one of them is hosting capacity. So I can run this thing, this incremental hosting capacity, and if load flow runs on your model, hosting capacity will run on it. And so you can run incremental hosting capacity, go to the results, and we can look at the the PV incremental hosting for maximum megawatts. And then we'll have a heat map here that shows how much generation can be added to the model. Now then, if your model has the lat long coordinates set on it, so I'll show you where that is. If you go to a section and we look at the coordinates here, these are XY coordinates. And if I click on that, I can see that in my model here, I've got latitude and longitude values. If these are 0, then you're not going to be able to do what I'm fixing to do. So how do you get these set? You can work with your GIS folks, and they can push these in because the GIS is going to be very good at calculating these. We do have a tool in Synergi that you can run on your database, and it'll calculate them for you. So one of those two approaches, you get your latitude and longitude set. Then for any result over here, it doesn't have to be hosting capacity. Any result, you right click on it and you say open in Google Earth, and I'll say okay here. And this is on the wrong screen here. I'll drag it over when it finishes loading here. So Google Earth starts up, and oops. It's going to let me drag while it's where, there we go. All right, so now we've got the heat map and the sections, and we can go in and look at this thing on an orthophoto basis. And so it's very, very handy. And so it's super easy to do. Now, if your utility is looking to publish this, well, you're not going to do this, right? This is for you as an engineer to easily get stuff on a map. And you can see we have symbols on here. We have looked at annotation. It's a little bit more difficult, but we continue to learn about Google Earth, excuse me, and we're adding functionality to this. If your utility needs to publish a map, you're probably going to use something like an ARC ArcMap, the web version, you have some sort of system that you already use. So the approach would be to run EA automation on the macros tab. This stuff here, which was going to automate hosting capacity for your whole system, put the results into a database, and then that information will get posted onto your map on your website for creating heat maps. And the coordinates and the coordinates on the map and this thing called a projection are going to be getting more and more important as we proceed. We are hard at work on improving. We're going to make a step change in these maps. This component that we have kind of in the background of Synergi is a 32-bit component. We've had to replace it, so we're working on new stuff. It looks really good, and the performance seems to be better. It looks like, and this is all preliminary, but it looks like we're going to have a lot more flexibility on icons and annotation, line styles, all sorts of great things. And it also looks like we're going to have an inherent background map that would be street-based. So you will be able to turn that off. But I think I would imagine I certainly would want mine on. And with those street maps in place, it's going to be very important for these coordinates to be accurate, and for you to be able to provide this thing called a projection, which is a geographic file. It's a big long piece of text that talks about how your coordinate system is arranged, and then you tell that to Synergi, and then we should be able to set up your model and show it on a street map view. So that's a work in progress, but we're hopefully we're going to have that going here soon. Okay, so I want to look at annotation and results. So after you run an analysis, like I'm going to run load flow here to refresh, turn off the light bulb so that you don't get a whole bunch of tabs piled up here. So if you don't need a report, just turn off the light bulb, and that way you can continue to focus on the map. And if you go to the results tab over here, and we look at we can look at hosting capacity again, where we have the hosting capacity here. I did a right click. First I clicked on it to color the map, and then if I do a right click here, we've got these annotation spots. And so you can click on annotate, and it's going to put that result into the first slot of the results. So that's slot A, and slot B really shouldn't have come. That was something I did before. But if I want to know what the heck is in that slot B, you can bring up your floating legend, and you can see right there, it's light green. It's hard to read, but it's KW into. So if we don't want that, we can go to the display tab and turn off slot number 2 right there. So if you've been using Synergi for a long time, you're used to bringing up the display settings, but you shouldn't have to bring up display settings routinely. You might do it once to get symbol sizes and your colors and those sorts of things, but after that you're good to go. If you want to look at a different result on here, you can go to just right click on it. You can do annotation 2 slot. That was losses. So setting up annotation is very easy, coloring the map. Then if we want to look at results, 2 approaches here. And I'll turn off my results for annotation right here. Click on that to turn them off. One that is fairly new, it was a client request, maybe a year ago. Super useful is results boxes. And one way that I use these is I might be zoomed in somewhere looking at something, and I need to go and find out some information about a transformer, perhaps, substation transformers. So I can go to this list here, and I can right click on a substation transformer and hit results box. So now I've got results right here for that transformer, and these are the different types of results I could have. So loading levels, whatever, taps are on there. You can bring up feeders, substations, and these boxes float around. I'm sorry, they don't move, they're fixed, right? So if you bring up a results box on a section, just remember that if you pan and zoom, you might forget where this thing belongs. I think there's a flash on here somewhere to find it. You can certainly, anyway, you can bring up the section editor and zoom to bring the map back where it was. So the results box are here. The other thing you can do is to do text labels. And with text labels, these quick ones down here are pre-built. So the basic is going to be power flow and amps. So if I click on that, I added it. Why didn't it show up? Text label. Golly, I must have that thing turned off somehow. Things are going pretty smoothly here. I seem to always run into a problem. I've got them turned off someplace, so I just don't want to waste time dragging this through that. But if you double click on the map here, then this display settings comes up that I said you shouldn't have to go into, but just looking here quickly to see if I've got it turned off here. No, it's on. Well, golly, I don't know what's up. So let me just see if I can get one. These are, I use these all the time, and I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here too. So it should be a piece of text. It sits on the map, and with the text label editor, you can come in here and choose your results. You can put in labels, all these sorts of things. And what's nice about those is they stay fixed to the map. So when you drag them around, they're going to stay in place. And you can also have them stored with the model, so that's also good. Yeah, I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's up. The charting is something we focused on a lot, and there is a on the Views tab over here. We can bring up this path plot tool right here. And what's nice about the path plot is that you can click on a section here and look at something like voltage from that section all the way back to the source. And you can just click around on different sections and see that information. So this is with voltage, and we regularly add things as clients ask for them. So bars and these effective grounding ratios are in here for PV grounding. So it's really handy and it's quick to use. Then we have the if you go back to the results tab and we click on something like we'll do this hosting capacity. If you right click on this, then we can do a chart plot here, and that's going to put this information into a scatter plot like this. And because I right clicked on the maximum PV value, that's what's showing up here. And so we can see these, and what's really nice about this chart is that these are live, these dots are. So if you click on one of these, do a right click on it, you can do a zoom to and find that section. So if you're doing, especially if you're doing like impedance, fault levels, things like that, it's really handy to be able to go from the chart to the model. So that's the from the results tab, you just go in here and do the chart plot. The scatter plot will probably take off. That was an older version, and it was not, the dots have no intelligence on that one, so you can't really do anything with it. It's just to look at. The golly, sorry, I'm having trouble remembering where the other. Oh, okay, sorry. On the analysis tab, we have this bar and pi sitting here, and this doesn't do a lot right now, but we intend to add a lot more to it. When an analysis is run, we produce those results that I was using to color the map. The load flow is now producing some histograms, So here is miles of line in different voltage intervals. And then here's one for losses, a pie chart for losses. So it's only load flow, it's only these two right now, so it's super modest, but we're going to be adding a lot of hopefully complex types of things to look at relationships in ways that are best done through a chart. And so we'll be adding those in. We've got the plumbing, the architecture is all in place for this bar and pie, and we're going to keep adding to that. Let's see here. So in our, or let me see if I missed anything here. Yeah, strive for geographic accuracy, and most every utility, the models are spot on geographically, but I know there's some utilities where there's a shift due to mergers and whatever over the years, things are just not quite right. But it'll be great if you do have really accurate geography in Synergi, as we do more and more with the land base in there. I think I've covered everything in here, but I want to show you a new feature. And this was another client request from about 3 weeks ago. If we go into a feeder, there is now a log tab in here. And so you can come in here and you can say, well, on this feeder we added a regulator. Something like that. And so we've got a comment in here. And so this is going to be information for this feeder. And so you can go into each feeder, you can go into the subtran, into the T symbols, and you can do these comments like this. And they're going to get stored with your model. So it could be a history log that then I got to find it again. On the Views tab, there's a log viewer here. And this is nice because it's got a list of all of my sources. And then if you click on one of these, like I was editing New Liberty, and so I can see, so this is a way where I can just quickly go through all of my sources and see whatever comments that have been added or the history of work that's been done on that feeder. So we think that's going to be a useful tool. In 2 minutes here, the client that asked for this was really looking for something that was model wide, and that utility, that group of engineers at that utility worked off of access databases. So they're doing kind of studies, investigations, looking ahead at things in their utility, and their models were individual access, or maybe substation models, something like that. And so they wanted a way to put in this sort of commentary for a model, for an entire model. And that was a head scratcher for us because we've got a lot of utilities that have one feeder in a database, and then we have a lot of utilities that have their entire system in Oracle and SQL Server. And so the meaning of a model changes. And so how can we track this sort of thing across an entire model? So what we came up with was, if I go back to this feeder and we look at this this feeder, is there's part of a model log. And if I check this, I can have multiple feeders. So every feeder in Subtran that I mark as part of a model log, then when I go and make edits to that, it's going to apply it to all sources that are in that model log. So that's weird that it keeps that's a little bug in there. So if it's part of a model log and I go and I put some text in here, and then I go and back over to look at this feeder, you can see now that that text that I typed in is going to override. It's going to replace what I had in here before. So it could, so you have to be careful here, because you would want all the feeders and subtrans, maybe everything that's in a substation, to be marked as part of a model log, so that when you change the text, it's all going to get changed together. But if you don't want to go that route, you can have text on individual feeders and subtrans. So we're going to have to learn as we go what sort of tools and things we can put in here. But I think the general feature, the general idea of being able to put in your comments of work that you've done on this model is going to be a good one, and is a really good suggestion from the client. All right, well, we're over here, and I appreciate your time. And yeah, and so this model log is going to be in 6.14, which will be out next week, hopefully. And color by protected device type and export to Google Earth. No, that's a good idea. You can't color by protected device type. It's going to be up in the display, color by protection device type. What I don't think is we don't have a way to get this coloring to Google Earth. And that's just a plumbing problem, because it's the right click over here that does it. So if hold on, a client taught me this trick actually. If I do a left click on max megawatts, my hosting capacity is going to replace these colors. So if I simply do a right click and open in Google Earth here, I should get that coloring. We'll see here. Let me look at the other chats here. Yeah, that's right. So Damon, I think that's exactly right. And that's that's not a design, that's an accident on our behalf. So maybe we should try to formalize that more. And with the secondary, yeah, there we go. So there's not a key yet. We don't have like a information over in these panels, and so you'd have to know what this coloring meant. Maybe just do a screenshot of the floating legend. But yeah, that works. So we probably need to formalize this and get some documentation and put it on Yammer, because that is great to be able to do that with whatever's out there. The question on the secondaries, you don't have to have the secondaries mapped. You just need to have a way to associate customers and distribution transformers to sections. And so if that data can be pulled in, and there doesn't need to be any geography on the secondary, it just has to be associated with sections. And then, yeah, the line thickness, you should be able to change the colors and line thickness in the display settings in there. And back when I was doing that tracing, you should be able to set those thicknesses up. And great. Okay, well, thank you all very much, and I'm going to stop the recording here and shut things down, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great one.